The phone rang at 6:47 in the morning, and the number on the screen was one I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. I was standing in my kitchen in Guelph, still in my flannel robe, waiting for the kettle to boil. 64 years old, retired civil engineer, and my biggest concern that Tuesday was whether the frost had gotten into the garden beds overnight. I picked up. "Is this Mr. Sutherland, father of Cassandra Sutherland Bryce?" Something locked up in my chest. "Yes, speaking." "Sir, my name is Kevin Tran. I'm a registered nurse at Guelph General Hospital. Your daughter was brought in early this morning by ambulance. She's been admitted to the ICU. I think you need to come in now." I set down my mug without thinking. Tea spilled across the counter. I didn't notice. The drive to the hospital was 12 minutes. I did it in 8. I hadn't spoken to Cassie in almost 3 weeks. That wasn't unusual. Things between us had been strained since she married Warren. 3 years of marriage, and I had never once felt comfortable around that man. Too smooth, too attentive in that particular way that felt like performance rather than affection. He watched things. He watched me. He watched Cassie's reactions when she talked about money, about the house, about what I'd left in my will. But she was my daughter, my only child, and whatever had gone cold between us, hearing the word ICU had dissolved all of it in an instant. I parked badly and ran. The woman at the admissions desk gave me Cassie's room number and pointed me toward the elevator. I was halfway down the corridor on the 3rd floor when someone stepped in front of me. He was young, late 20s maybe, dark scrubs, ID badge clipped to his chest. Kevin Tran, RN. "Mr. Sutherland." He kept his voice low. His eyes moved once down the hallway. "I need you to come with me before you go in there." "What's wrong, is she?" "She's stable, but I need you to hear something first." He glanced down the corridor again. "Please." I followed him. He led me around a corner and through a door marked "Staff Only." A small supply room, shelves of gauze and saline bags, and folded linens. He shut the door quietly behind us. "I wasn't sure if I should call you at all," he said. "I went back and forth all night. But I have a father, and if I were in his position, I'd want to know." "Know what?" He looked directly at me. "Your daughter came in at 4:15 this morning. Her husband brought her. He told triage she'd fallen down the stairs at home, lost her footing in the dark, hit her head on the landing." "Is that not what happened?" Kevin hesitated. "When I was prepping her for the CT scan, your son-in-law was in the room. He didn't know I was still on the other side of the curtain. He was on his phone. He said, a pause. He said, 'It worked. She's in. Now we wait and get the paperwork moving.'" The room felt very still. "What paperwork?" I said, though some part of me had already started to understand. "I don't know. But the way he said it, it wasn't the voice of a worried husband, Mr. Sutherland. I've worked this floor for 6 years. I know the difference." I stood there among the shelves of medical supplies and tried to hold the shape of what he was telling me. My daughter, my son-in-law, a fall that may not have been a fall. "She's really hurt?" I asked. "Concussion, some bruising on her left shoulder. Nothing life-threatening. She'll be discharged in 2, maybe 3 days." He paused. "But sir, the reason I called you specifically is that when I was logging the intake paperwork, I saw her emergency contact had been changed. It used to list you. Now it lists only Warren Bryce." I didn't say anything. "I thought you should know," Kevin said. "That's all I can tell you. I've probably already said too much." He opened the door and held it for me. I thanked him. I don't remember what words I used. I walked down the corridor to my daughter's room, and I put a careful, calm look on my face, and I pushed open the door. Warren was sitting in the chair beside her bed. He stood when I came in, that practiced movement, all concern and welcome. "Robert, thank God you're here. I was going to call you. It was such a shock, I didn't know where to start." "Of course," I said. I looked past him at Cassie. She was awake. There was a bandage on the left side of her forehead, a bruise already purpling under her eye. She looked at me, and something crossed her face that I couldn't read. Not relief, something more complicated than that. "Dad," she said. I came as fast as I could. I sat in the other chair, across from Warren. "What happened?" Warren told me. He was good at telling it. The late hour, the dark hallway, Cassie getting up for a glass of water, the terrible sound of her falling. His voice had grief and helplessness in it. His hands were folded in his lap. I watched his hands. I stayed for 2 hours. I held Cassie's hand for a while. She was quiet, a little medicated, said she was tired. When I left, Warren walked me to the elevator. "She's lucky to have you," he said. "Yes," I said, "she is." I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. I am not a man who panics. 38 years as a structural engineer teaches you to look at load-bearing problems methodically, to identify what is stable and what is not, to never assume a crack is superficial until you've traced it to its source. I went inside and called my accountant. Walter Drummond had been managing my finances for 20 years. I trusted him completely. I told him I wanted a full picture of my accounts, my assets, and particularly, I asked him to tell me if anyone, in the last 6 months, had made any inquiries about my estate, any requests to verify assets, any third-party contact. Walter called me back 2 hours later. There had been an inquiry. A law firm in Hamilton had sent a letter 4 months ago requesting a valuation of my principal residence in Guelph and my secondary property in Tobermory. The letter had cited a pending estate planning review and listed Cassandra Sutherland Bryce as the instructing party. I had never authorized any estate planning review. I sat with that information for a long time. The house in Guelph was worth just over $900,000. The cottage in Tobermory was another $480,000. My RRSP and pension combined were another $600,000. I had worked for all of it. 38 years of projects, of early mornings and late reports and missed dinners, of building bridges and water treatment facilities across southern Ontario. I had kept meticulous records. I had paid my taxes. I had provided for Cassie's university, her first car, the down payment on her and Warren's house in Waterloo. And someone, a law firm I had never heard of, instructed by my daughter, had been quietly cataloging what I owned. I did not confront anyone, not yet. I called an old colleague instead, a man named Fletcher Boyd, who had retired from provincial infrastructure work and spent his second career consulting for insurance fraud cases. We'd known each other since 1991. I trusted his judgment. I told Fletcher everything, the phone call from the nurse, what Kevin had overheard, the law firm inquiry. Fletcher was quiet for a moment. "Rob," he said, "what you're describing is a pattern. The inquiry into assets, the possible staging of an injury, the emergency contact change. Someone's building a case." "A case for what?" "Incapacity or undue influence." He paused. "If someone were trying to establish grounds to challenge your legal competency or to fast-track a power of attorney, an incident like this, a hospitalization, a documented need for care, it creates a narrative. You're suddenly an aging father, shaken by his daughter's accident, possibly not thinking clearly." I felt cold, not angry, just cold. "What would you do?" I asked. "Document everything," Fletcher said. "Change nothing on your end that would alert them, and quietly, very quietly, talk to a lawyer." I called Margaret Osei the next morning. She was a partner at a firm in Guelph I'd used for a property transaction years back. Sharp, unhurried, careful. I laid out everything I knew. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Mr. Sutherland, I want you to understand something. What you're describing, if it is what it appears to be, constitutes elder financial abuse under Ontario law. That is a criminal matter, not just a civil one. But we need evidence, not suspicion." "How do I get it?" "You live normally. You're accessible. You don't change your will. You don't move your accounts. You don't do anything that looks like you're protecting assets. But you give me permission to document your current testamentary capacity. We do an assessment now, on the record, so that if anyone tries to challenge it later, they're standing in front of a wall." She paused. "And you let me send a quiet inquiry back to that Hamilton law firm." I agreed to all of it. The assessment was straightforward, a conversation with a capacity assessor, an independent professional who documented that I was entirely competent to manage my affairs. It took one afternoon. I thought of Fletcher's word, narrative. Someone was trying to build a narrative. I was building a different one. 3 weeks passed. Cassie was discharged from hospital. She and Warren went back to Waterloo. I called her twice a week, the same as I always had. I didn't mention the law firm. I didn't mention Kevin Tran. I listened to her voice and tried to find the daughter I had raised in it. She had been a lovely child, curious and stubborn and funny. She'd wanted to be a marine biologist until she was 16, then abruptly switched to business administration, which I'd never quite understood. She'd met Warren in her final year of university and brought him home at Christmas. He'd been charming over the turkey. He'd helped with the dishes. I had tried for 3 years to believe I was wrong about him. In the 4th week, Margaret called me. The Hamilton law firm, Graves & Soltis LLP, had responded to her inquiry. They confirmed they had been retained by Cassandra Sutherland Bryce. They could not disclose the nature of their instructions. Standard language, but Margaret had done her own research. Graves & Soltis specialized in 2 areas: estate litigation and substitute decision-making applications. A substitute decision-making application is what you file when you want a court to declare someone legally incapable of managing their own affairs. I sat in Margaret's office and looked at the framed photographs of Lake Superior on her wall and breathed carefully. "They haven't filed anything yet," Margaret said. "This is still in preparation, but the structure is there. They're building a case that you are an aging widower, increasingly isolated, making erratic financial decisions. They would likely argue that your existing will doesn't reflect your true wishes and that you require someone to act on your behalf." She folded her hands on her desk. "That someone, presumably, would be your daughter. And if they succeed, Warren Bryce would have de facto control of all decisions, your properties, your accounts, your pension income." She held my gaze. "Mr. Sutherland, I want to be direct with you. This is not a small thing." "No," I said, "it isn't." I thought about the night Cassie had married Warren, the reception at a vineyard near Niagara-on-the-Lake, how she'd looked in her dress, how I danced with her to a song her mother used to love, and how she'd pressed her face into my shoulder for a moment and said, quietly, "I love you, Dad." How I had believed her completely. I still believed she loved me. That was the hardest part. I didn't think this was Cassie's idea, but she had made her choices. I went home and I made mine. I did not move my RRSP. I did not sell either property. I did not change my will. I did call my bank. I spoke with a senior advisor at the Guelph branch of RBC, a woman named Priya, who had helped me with my financial planning for 4 years. I explained that I had reason to believe a fraudulent application might be made against my accounts and that I wanted to add a flag requiring in-person verification with 2 pieces of identification for any changes to my account structure or beneficiary designations. Priya arranged it the same day. Then I waited. The application came 6 weeks later. Graves & Soltis filed a Form 1 Capacity Assessment request with the Consent and Capacity Board of Ontario. They submitted a supporting affidavit, signed by Cassandra Sutherland Bryce, stating that her father had shown signs of cognitive decline, social isolation, and had made several recent financial decisions that caused her concern. The financial decisions they cited: a donation I had made to the University of Guelph's Engineering Scholarship Fund, a trip I had taken to Newfoundland in September, the fact that I had not responded to her phone calls for a period of 2 weeks in July. I had been in Tobermory in July. Cassie had known that. Margaret filed our response immediately. We submitted my capacity assessment, conducted weeks before their application by an independent assessor showing full competency. We submitted documentation of the July trip to Tobermory, including records Cassie herself would have had of my travel plans. We submitted Walter's records showing the donation to the university was a regular annual contribution I had made for 11 years. And Margaret submitted a counter-complaint to the Ontario Provincial Police's Financial Crimes Unit. I want to be honest about what the weeks after that felt like. People hear revenge story and they imagine satisfaction, a clean settling of accounts, a chapter closed. That is not what it felt like. It felt like watching something die. I received a call from a detective with the OPP in late November. He was careful and professional. He told me they were reviewing the matter. He told me the affidavit Cassie had signed contained statements that appeared to be materially false. He said Warren Bryce had also made representations to the law firm that were under review. He did not tell me what the outcome would be. 3 weeks before Christmas, Warren was charged obstruction of justice and filing a false sworn statement in a civil proceeding. The charges carried the possibility of imprisonment. Graves and Soltis withdrew from the file. The capacity application was dismissed. I sat in my kitchen in Guelph on a cold December morning with a cup of tea I didn't drink and looked out at the backyard. The garden was under snow. I had built the raised beds myself 15 years ago with cedar boards and bags of composted soil. Cassie had helped me the summer she was 17. She'd complained the whole afternoon and then been enormously proud of the tomatoes. She had not called me. She had sent a text 9 days after the charges were filed. It said, "I didn't know it would go this far. I'm sorry." I read it several times. I thought about what to say. I thought about what she meant by this far, whether the distance she was measuring was from some earlier acceptable version of the plan or from the version she told herself she had never agreed to. I did not respond. I'm not a cold man. I want to be clear about that. I spent a long time, longer than I've described here, sitting with grief that had nothing to do with money. The money, the properties, the accounts, those were just objects. Containers. What I mourned was something much older and harder to name. Cassie spent Christmas with Warren's family in Edmonton. I ate turkey with Fletcher and his wife at their place in Fergus. We drank a decent Pinot Noir from the Okanagan and watched the snow come down through the kitchen window and didn't talk about any of it. In January, I updated my will. I did not remove Cassie entirely. I left her the Tobermory cottage because her mother had loved that place and because there are some things that should outlast their circumstances. The Guelph house and the bulk of the estate went to the University Scholarship Fund and to 2 other charities I had supported for years. Warren pleaded guilty in March to the lesser charge of filing a false statement. He received a conditional discharge and 2 years of probation. No jail time. I knew going in that was the likely outcome for a first offense in Ontario. I had made peace with it before the hearing. What I hadn't made peace with, and still haven't entirely, is the version of my daughter that would sign an affidavit calling her father cognitively impaired. I don't know how that happened. I don't know at what point love became asset management. But I know this: I am 64 years old, and I built everything I have with my own hands and my own time. I did not become easy to take from simply because I became old enough to look like I might be. They miscalculated. They looked at a retired man in a flannel robe waiting for the kettle to boil, and they saw something soft. I suppose I should thank them for underestimating me. I don't, though. Some things are not worth the gratitude. I still have the text on my phone. I haven't deleted it. I didn't know it would go this far. I'm sorry. 9 words. No punctuation at the end, as if even she couldn't bring herself to close the sentence. I've read it maybe 100 times since December, not looking for something hidden in it, just sitting with the fact that it exists, that my daughter sent it, that it is the closest thing to an apology I received after everything that happened. What I keep coming back to, and I know this might sound strange, is not Warren. Warren was what he was. A man who looked at another person's life's work and saw an opportunity. That kind of person exists, and the world keeps producing them, and the only real question is whether you are paying enough attention to recognize one when he sits across from you at Christmas dinner. The harder thing is the choice Cassie made. Not all at once, I think. It probably happened in small steps, a conversation here, a rationalization there, until she was standing at a notary's desk signing a document that called her father cognitively impaired. Each step must have felt almost reasonable from inside it. That's how it works. That's how decent people end up doing things they can't explain to themselves afterward. I don't say that to excuse her. I say it because understanding how something happens is not the same as forgiving it, and I needed to understand before I could decide what I actually felt. What I felt, in the end, was this. I had done my part. I had raised her, provided for her, told her the truth as best I could, shown her what it looked like to work honestly toward something and protect it carefully. That was all I had ever had to give. The character she built from that, or didn't build, was hers. I could not construct it for her, and I could not be responsible for the gaps in it. Kevin Tran didn't have to call me. He had nothing to gain and something real to lose. He made a decision in the middle of a night shift based on what he understood to be right. That kind of clarity, knowing what you owe another person even when it costs you, is not something you arrive at by accident. It is something you practice quietly every day in decisions nobody else sees. Fletcher did the same. Margaret did the same. Priya at the bank. None of them were related to me. None of them were obligated. They helped because they were the kind of people who help. I think about that when I wonder what I should have done differently. The answer, mostly, is not much. I stayed calm when I wanted to react. I documented instead of confronting. I trusted people who had earned it, and was cautious with people who hadn't. Not because I am particularly wise, but because 38 years of engineering teaches you that the structure either holds or it doesn't, and emotion alone does not change the load. The cottage in Tovermory is still in the will. I made that decision deliberately, and I stand by it. Some things should outlast their circumstances. Her mother loved that place. I'm not going to let one terrible chapter erase everything that came before it. I am 64 years old. I expect to have another 20 or 30 years of mornings in this kitchen, kettle on, garden to tend. I intend to use them well. They thought that being old meant being easy to take from. They were wrong about that, and now they know it.